I sat in the empty staff lounge at Seattle General Hospital, having just finished a 12-hour shift in the cardiac unit. My phone buzzed at 9:47 on a Wednesday morning. Mom's message lit up the screen. Uncle Richard passed away last night. Funeral Saturday. Will reading Monday at 2 p.m. My hands started shaking. Uncle Richard was gone. I had spoken to him 3 days earlier, our usual Tuesday evening call. He'd sounded tired, sure, but he was still complaining about the Mariners pitching like always. We'd talked about his garden, a book he was reading, nothing important. That was our way. You okay? My coworker Lisa touched my shoulder. My uncle died, I said quietly. Oh, Emma. I'm so sorry. I nodded, unable to speak past the tightness in my throat. I excused myself and went to my car in the parking garage. I sat there and cried for 20 minutes. I had known this day would come eventually. Uncle Richard was 78, but knowing didn't make it hurt less. Another buzz from Mom. Don't expect anything at the will reading. He barely knew we were his real family. I stared at that message for a long time. Then I blocked out the pain and drove home to my small apartment on Capitol Hill. The funeral was exactly what I expected. Mom and Dad arrived early in expensive black clothes. My older sister Melissa came with her husband Brandon and their 2 kids. My brother Kyle showed up late, reeking of cologne. I had arrived an hour early to be alone with Uncle Richard before everyone else. The service was brief. The pastor spoke in generic platitudes. Melissa cried loudly. Mom dabbed her eyes. Dad stood stoic. I didn't cry. I had already done that. At the reception afterward at Mom and Dad's house in Medina, the family gathered in clusters. I stood alone by the window holding a cup of coffee I didn't want. Emma. Mom approached, voice low. We need to discuss Monday. The will reading. Okay. Your father and I have been thinking. Richard's estate is substantial. The house alone is worth over $1 million. He had investments, savings. We're talking significant money. I said nothing. But you should understand, Mom continued, Richard barely knew you, Emma. You visited him a few times a year at most. We were his real family. So when the will is read, don't expect anything significant. Maybe a small token amount. Every Tuesday for 6 years, I thought. But I just said, okay. Dad joined us. Emma, your mother's right. Richard and I were close. Brothers. Inheritance goes to immediate family first. When was the last time you saw him before he died? I asked. Dad frowned. Christmas. We had him over for Christmas dinner. 8 months ago. For hours surrounded by expensive food and expensive conversations. Uncle Richard had looked uncomfortable the whole time. He seemed fine then, Mom added. Healthy. This was very sudden. It wasn't sudden. He had been diagnosed with congestive heart failure 2 years ago. I had taken him to every cardiology appointment, picked up his medications, used my nursing background to translate medical jargon. But my family didn't know any of that. Melissa appeared with white wine. Are we talking about the will reading? Obviously the house goes to Mom and Dad. They can sell it. The rest should be split among us kids. Fair and equal. We'll see what Richard decided, Dad said carefully. Kyle joined the circle. Did he even have a will? Of course, Mom said. His lawyer called. Everyone named has to attend. You, me, your father, Melissa, Kyle, Emma. And a few others, I assume. Charities, probably. Richard was sentimental like that. Sentimental. They thought Uncle Richard was sentimental. He was the most practical, logical man I knew. A structural engineer for 40 years. He bought his house in Ballard in 1982 for $95,000. It was now worth $1.2 million. I knew this because we talked about everything on our Tuesday calls. The reception wound down. I helped clean up while Melissa supervised and Mom directed. Dad retreated to his office. Kyle left early. See you Monday, Mom said as I was leaving. 2 o'clock. Don't be late. And Emma, try to dress professionally. This is important. I drove home thinking about the first time I truly talked to Uncle Richard. I was 24, fresh out of nursing school, drowning in debt. Mom asked me to drop something off at his house. He invited me in for coffee. We talked for 3 hours. He asked about my work, really asked. He listened. No one else ever did that. Before I left, he said, "You should come back next week. I make pretty good coffee." I came back. Every Tuesday for 6 years. He became my best friend. And no one in my family knew. They assumed I was just being nice to a lonely old relative. They had no idea he was the only person who actually saw me. Monday arrived too quickly. I took the day off work. I dressed in black pants, a white blouse, and a blazer, the outfit I'd bought for job interviews. The law office was on the 34th floor of a glass building in downtown Seattle. Mom and Dad were already there. Melissa and Brandon sat across from them. Kyle was on his phone in a corner. "Emma." Mom stood. "Finally. Early is on time is late." The receptionist smiled. "You must be Emma Chin. Mr. Hartwell is expecting you." We filed into a large conference room. Dark wood table, leather chairs, law books everywhere. A man in his 60s stood. "Good afternoon. I'm Robert Hartwell, Richard Chen's estate attorney. Please have a seat." We arranged ourselves around the table. Mom and Dad at one end. Melissa and Brandon beside them. Kyle across. I sat at the far end. "First, my condolences. Richard was a wonderful man. I worked with him for over 20 years. Mr. Hartwell opened a leather portfolio. Before we begin, I want to clarify, this will was executed 18 months ago. Richard was of sound mind. It was witnessed, notarized, and legally binding. He put on reading glasses. The last will and testament of Richard Michael Chin, executed March 15, 2024. He read through the legal language. Then he reached the bequests. To my brother Daniel Chin and his wife Patricia Chin, I leave the sum of $5,000 each, for a total of $10,000. Silence. Mom's face froze. To my niece Melissa Chin Morrison, I leave the sum of $5,000. Melissa's mouth opened. What? Please hold questions until the end, Mr. Hartwell said gently. To my nephew Kyle Chin, I leave the sum of $5,000. Kyle put his phone down, confused. The entirety of my remaining estate, including my residence at 4728 Sunset Avenue, all bank accounts, investment portfolios, retirement accounts, personal property, and any other assets, I leave to my niece Emma Louise Chin. The room went completely silent. I couldn't breathe. The estate has been valued at approximately $3.2 million, Mr. Hartwell continued. This includes the Ballard residence at $1.2 million, investment accounts totaling $1.7 million, savings and checking of $200,000, and personal property of roughly $100,000. Mom had gone pale. Sheet white. Richard also left a letter to be read at this time. Mr. Hartwell pulled out an envelope. He opened it and read in Uncle Richard's voice, direct, practical, no wasted words. To my brother Dan and his wife Patricia, you are good people. You worked hard. You raised 3 children. I'm proud of you. But let's be honest. You visited me once at Christmas. You called on my birthday and major holidays. That's fine. I don't fault you. You had busy lives. To Melissa, you're ambitious. You've built a beautiful life. The few times you visited, you were polite but distracted. Always on your phone. Always rushing to leave. That's okay. To Kyle, you're young. The handful of times you came by, your mother made you. You were bored. I don't blame you. Here's the thing. For the past 6 years, Emma has come to my house every Tuesday evening, 6 to 8 p.m. Like clockwork. She never missed. She came when she was exhausted from 12-hour hospital shifts. She came when she had the flu. She came during snowstorms. She came because she wanted to. We drank coffee. We talked about everything. She told me about her patients, her challenges as a nurse, her dream of becoming a nurse practitioner someday. I told her about my career, about her grandmother. She listened to my stories. She laughed at my jokes. She cared about my opinions. When I was diagnosed with heart failure 2 years ago, Emma took me to every appointment. She made sure I understood my medications. She helped me modify my diet. She called between visits to check on me. She did this while working full-time, while dealing with her own struggles, while being dismissed by her own family. None of you knew any of this. You didn't know because you never asked. You assumed Emma was just being nice. But Emma saw me, not as an obligation or a future inheritance. As a person. As a friend. She gave me something precious, her time and her genuine care. That's worth more than money can measure. So I'm leaving her everything. The $5,000 bequests are not insults. They're acknowledgments. Your family. I loved you. But Emma earned this inheritance through 6 years of showing up. If you're angry, ask yourselves, when was the last time you spent 2 hours with me just talking? When was the last time you asked about my life? Emma asked every Tuesday for 6 years. That matters. With love and no regrets, Richard Chin. Mr. Hartwell set down the letter. The silence was suffocating. Tears ran down my face. I couldn't stop them. This is insane, Melissa said, voice shaking. He was clearly manipulated. I assure you, Mr. Hartwell interrupted calmly, the will is completely legal and valid. Richard was evaluated by his physician 3 weeks before executing this will. The doctor certified he was of sound mind and not under undue influence. She's a nurse, Mom said sharply. She had access. Mrs. Chin, any allegations of impropriety could expose you to legal liability. Richard made this decision freely. I was present when he signed. But $3 million, Dad said, stunned. He's your brother. We're family. And Emma is your daughter, Mr. Hartwell said quietly. Also family. This is different, Mom insisted. We spent decades with him. With respect, what matters to Richard was the present. Emma was present during his final years. That's what he valued. Kyle stared at me. He never told us about the Tuesday visits. You never asked, I said softly. Melissa's face was pure fury. You manipulated an old man. We're contesting this. That is your right, Mr. Hartwell said. However, any contest will be expensive and, in my professional opinion, doomed to fail. Richard anticipated this. He left phone records, visitor logs from his doctor's appointments, receipts for medications Emma purchased, testimony from neighbors who only ever saw Emma visiting. He was an engineer. He documented everything. Dad asked how long a contest would take. 6 months to a year, legal fees of $25,000 to $50,000. And they would almost certainly lose. So we're just supposed to accept this? Melissa demanded. That's your decision, Mr. Hartwell said. But I strongly advise accepting it. He turned to me. Emma, any questions? I wiped my eyes. When did he decide this? We discussed it about 2 years ago, shortly after his diagnosis. He wanted to make sure the person who actually cared for him would benefit. He never told you because he didn't want it to affect your visits. He knew you were coming for him, not for money. Fresh tears spilled over. Uncle Richard had known. Of course he had. In the elevator down, no one spoke. When we reached the lobby, Mom turned to me. If you had any decency, you'd split that money with your family. No, I said. Uncle Richard left it to me. He explained why. I'm honoring his decision. You're being selfish, Melissa said. Maybe, but I earned it. I walked away into the Seattle afternoon. That night, I drove to Uncle Richard's house. My house now, though that felt impossible. A small craftsman bungalow with a covered front porch. His garden was overgrown now. I used the key he had given me 2 years ago. The house smelled like him coffee, Old Spice, old books. I stood in the living room and cried. Everything was exactly as he had left it. 2 mugs in the sink. A bookmark halfway through his book. Photo albums on the shelf. Toward the back, I found photos I hadn't known existed. Photos of me and Uncle Richard. Someone must have taken them, maybe a neighbor. Us sitting on the porch drinking coffee. Us at the kitchen table, both laughing. Us in his garden. He had kept photos of our Tuesdays. I sat on his couch and cried until I couldn't cry anymore. The next weeks were brutal. My family called constantly. Mom wanted a family meeting. Melissa left voicemails about manipulation and greed. Dad sent long emails about family obligation. Kyle sent angry texts. I didn't respond. 3 weeks later, Mom showed up at my apartment. "We need to talk." She sat on my worn couch and looked around with barely concealed disdain. "You're really going to keep living here? You're about to inherit millions. Probate takes months. Emma, be reasonable." Richard was confused at the end. He wasn't confused. He was very clear. "You knew he had money. I didn't know the exact amounts. And I didn't care. I visited him because he was my friend. Because every Tuesday, I had someone who actually listened to me." Mom flinched. "We listen to you." "No, you don't. When's the last time you asked about my job?" "Really asked?" "I'm a cardiac care nurse. I've been thinking about going back to school to become a nurse practitioner. Did you know that?" Mom was silent. "I stopped expecting you to be interested years ago," I said. "Don't be surprised that I found someone who was. If you go through with this, your family will never forgive you." "Then I guess they won't." She left without another word. For weeks later, Melissa showed up with a lawyer at my apartment. She announced they were filing a contest. Her attorney offered a settlement, 40% to me, 60% split among the others. That would give them nearly $2 million. "No," I said. We went to court 5 months later. Judge Margaret Fisher presided. Melissa's lawyer argued that I had isolated Uncle Richard and unduly influenced him. He had no evidence. Just speculation. Mr. Hartwell presented phone records, appointment logs, testimony from neighbors and Uncle Richard's cardiologist, receipts for medications and groceries I had purchased, and the letter Richard had written in his own hand. Judge Fisher looked at Melissa. "Your uncle left a clear, documented explanation. He was evaluated by a physician and found competent. He had the right to leave his assets to whomever he chose." She turned to me. "Miss Chin, the evidence shows you provided consistent, loving care to your uncle for years. You did so without any expectation of inheritance. Your uncle valued that care. He chose to reward it. That was his right." Then back to Melissa. "If you had wanted to inherit, you should have been present in his life. That's not manipulation. That's consequence." She denied the contest and awarded me my legal fees, $12,000 that my family now owed me. 6 months after Uncle Richard's death, the estate cleared probate. I took possession of everything. I sat in his house on a Tuesday evening drinking coffee. Quiet. Too quiet. I called Mr. Hartwell. I set up a scholarship fund for nursing students. First-generation college students working their way through school. $50,000 a year. I also gave $100,000 to cardiac research in Uncle Richard's name. I moved into the Ballard bungalow. I enrolled in a nurse practitioner program at the University of Washington. I hired a gardener to restore Uncle Richard's garden. My family didn't speak to me for months. Then Kyle texted. We met at a coffee shop. He apologized. I can't remember a single real conversation with Uncle Richard. I didn't care about him. I just cared about what he could give me. A year later, Dad called. We were wrong. We were angry because we felt entitled. But we didn't earn it. You did. You had a real relationship with him. That was my failure, not yours. Mom called 2 days later with a more awkward apology. Melissa never apologized. 2 years passed. Then a cancer scare brought us together at the hospital. I visited with flowers. Why are you here? She asked. Because you're my sister. And because I'm a nurse. And because I know how scary this is. We both cried. It was a start. 3 years after Uncle Richard's death, I completed my nurse practitioner degree. I took a job at a cardiology clinic specializing in heart failure patients, the same condition Uncle Richard had. I helped patients understand their medications and their prognosis. I made sure no one faced their diagnosis alone. I still lived in his house. On Tuesday evenings, I sat on the porch with coffee and talked to him about my week, my patients, my life. The scholarship fund had helped 12 students. 3 graduated and became nurses. They sent thank you cards with photos in their scrubs. Uncle Richard would have loved that. I thought about his gift often. Not just the money, but what it represented. Someone had seen me, had valued me, had loved me. He had given me the knowledge that I was worth showing up for, that my time mattered, that I mattered. That was the real inheritance. The money was just proof.